The transport vessel Crimson Fang groaned like a dying beast as red warning lights bathed its metal corridors in blood. Captain Velter gripped his command chair so hard his knuckles turned white, staring at the security monitors in complete disbelief. This couldn't be happening. Not here. Not now. The neural containment field that had held their most dangerous cargo for 6 months was flickering like a broken lamp. Inside the reinforced prison cell, something massive moved in the shadows. The Ravager was waking up. Status report. Velter barked at his bridge crew, but he already knew the answer would be bad. Very bad, sir. The power surge from our jump. 2 hyperspace overloaded the containment grid, reported his second-in-command, sweat beading on his purple-scaled forehead. The neural inhibitors are failing one by one. Velter felt his stomach drop. The Ravager wasn't just any prisoner. It was a living weapon, created in the darkest laboratories of the Hegemony Empire. For 300 years, these creatures had been the stuff of nightmares across the galaxy. Planets surrendered just hearing one was coming. The entire fleets ran rather than face them in battle, and now one was loose on his ship. The first scream came from Deck 7, then the lights went out. Emergency power kicked in, casting everything in that sickly red glow that made everyone look like they were already dead. Through the ship's communication system, Velter could hear his crew shouting, running, dying. The security cameras showed the truth in all its horrible glory. The Ravager stood nearly 4 meters tall, its black shell gleaming like polished stone. Every movement was deadly grace, every step precise destruction. Razor-sharp spines jutted from its arms like natural swords, and 6 glowing eyes swept the corridor like searchlights hunting prey. "Sweet stars above," whispered the navigation officer, watching as the creature ripped through a blast door like it was made of paper. The first security team arrived within minutes. 5 soldiers in full combat armor carrying the latest plasma rifles. Velter watched them take positions, aim, and fire. White-hot energy bolts struck the Ravager square in the chest, enough firepower to vaporize a small building. The creature didn't even slow down. Instead, it turned toward the soldiers, with something that might have been amusement. One massive claw swept sideways, and 3 armored figures flew through the air like toys thrown by an angry child. They hit the wall and didn't get up. All units, fall back. Velter screamed into his communicator, his voice cracking with panic. Repeat. All units fall back. Do not engage the target. But it was too late. The Ravager was already moving deeper into the ship, leaving a trail of twisted metal and sparking electronics behind it. Every step shook the entire vessel, and with each thunderous footfall, more crew members abandoned their posts and ran for the escape pods. The creature's roar filled the corridors, a sound like grinding metal mixed with the screams of 1,000 dying worlds. It was a noise that reached into your chest and squeezed your heart until you couldn't breathe. Veterans who had fought in a dozen wars dropped their weapons and fled like children. "Where is it heading?" Velter demanded, though. Part of him didn't want to know the answer. "Civilian quarters, sir," came the reply. "Deck 12, the human prisoners, of course." The Ravager had been programmed to hunt, and humans were always the preferred target. Something about their brain chemistry drove these creatures into a killing frenzy. The Hegemony had learned that during the First War when they unleashed 3 Ravagers on a human colony world. Nothing had survived. Down in the civilian holding area, the captured humans huddled together in their cells like sheep waiting for slaughter. Most had been taken during the recent raid on New Sol, a peaceful research colony that had put up no resistance. Scientists, teachers, families who had never hurt anyone in their lives. Dr. Kim Tae-ho pressed his 7-year-old daughter, So-young, closer to his chest as the ship shuddered around them. He was a xenobiologist, a man who studied alien life forms. But he had never seen anything like the reports of these Ravagers. Few scientists who had examined dead specimens described them as the perfect fusion of biological horror and military engineering. "Appa, what's that noise?" So-young whispered in Korean, her small fingers gripping his shirt. She was trying to be brave, but he could feel her trembling. "Just the ship, little star," he lied, smoothing her black hair. "Everything will be okay." Taeho knew better. He could hear the screaming getting closer, could feel the vibrations of something massive moving through the corridors above them. The emergency lighting flickered with each impact, and somewhere in the distance, metal was tearing like fabric. The other prisoners had gone silent now, all of them listening to the approaching doom. A middle-aged teacher named Mrs. Park clutched her rosary and whispered prayers. Elderly merchant rocked back and forth, eyes wide with terror. Then the lights went out completely, leaving them in absolute darkness with only the sound of their own frightened breathing and the steady, thunderous footsteps getting closer and closer. The evacuation sirens wailed like banshees as crew members rushed through the corridors of the Crimson Fang, their footsteps echoing off metal walls. Emergency pods shot away from the ship one after another, tiny lights disappearing into the darkness of space like fleeing fireflies. "This way, move, move, move," shouted a security officer, herding the human prisoners toward the nearest escape route. The floor shook beneath their feet as something massive crashed through the levels above them. Dr. Kim Taho held Young's hand tightly as they joined the stream of panicking people. The corridor was packed with bodies pushing and shoving, everyone desperate to reach safety. Sparks rained down from damaged ceiling panels, and the acrid smell of burning electronics filled the air. "Stay close to me, little star," Taeho whispered to his daughter, but his words were swallowed by the chaos around them. That's when it happened. A massive explosion somewhere above sent a shockwave through the ship. The ceiling buckled and groaned, then a huge section of twisted metal crashed down between father and daughter like a steel wall. "Appa, da," screamed, reaching through the gap, but her small arms couldn't reach her father on the other side. "Young, I'm here. I'm coming." Taeho's voice was muffled by the debris. She could hear him trying to climb over the wreckage, metal scraping against metal, but the passage was completely blocked. The crowd swept Taeho away with them as another section of ceiling threatened to collapse. His desperate calls for his daughter faded into the distance, lost among the sounds of evacuation and destruction. So Dasyung stood alone in the flickering emergency lighting, tears streaming down her cheeks. The corridor that had been full of people moments ago was now empty except for her. Red lights blinked on and off, making shadows dance on the walls like monsters. She wiped her eyes with the back of her small hand and looked around. Her father had always taught her to be brave, to think clearly when she was scared. "When you're lost," he used to say, "follow the sounds. They'll tell you where to go." So-young listened carefully. Beyond the alarms and the groaning of the damaged ship, she heard something else, a soft whimpering like a hurt animal. It reminded her of the injured space rabbit they had found back on New Sol, the one her father had nursed back to health. In his laboratory, following the sound through the maze of corridors, So-young walked past broken computer panels and scattered equipment. The whimpering grew louder, leading her deeper into the ship. She passed signs in alien languages she couldn't read, but the pictures showed beakers and microscopes. This was the science section. The biolab door was wide open, hanging crooked on its damaged hinges. Inside, So-young could see overturned tables, broken glass containers, and strange alien plants scattered across the floor. But what caught her attention was the movement in the shadows at the far end of the room. 3 figures in white lab coats were huddled behind a metal table that had been flipped on its side, were shaking, and one of them was making the whimpering sound she had followed. These weren't humans. Their skin was pale blue, and they had 4 arms each. But they looked just as scared as anyone else, and standing over them was the source of their terror. The Ravager filled the far end of the lab like a living nightmare. Its obsidian shell reflected the emergency lights, making it look like it was carved from black crystal. Those 6 glowing eyes swept back and forth as it studied the cowering scientists. Acid dripped from its fangs onto the floor, where it hissed and ate through the metal plating. Any grown-up would have turned and run. Any soldier would have started shooting. But So-young had spent her whole life around her father's research. Animals, from tiny forest creatures to large space mammals. She knew how to read body language, how to tell when something was angry versus when it was hurt. The Ravager wasn't standing like a predator about to attack. Its massive shoulders were hunched, its head held low. One of its arms hung at an odd angle, and she could see scorch marks across its chest where the plasma rifles had hit it. This wasn't the posture of a killer. This was how animals looked when they were in pain and didn't understand why. Young stepped into the lab, her small shoes crunching on broken glass. The three alien scientists saw her and gestured frantically for her to run away, but she ignored them. She had seen that same confused, hurting look in the eyes of wounded animals before. The Ravager's 6 eyes locked onto her instantly. Its massive head swung around, and for a moment the creature went completely still. Its genetic programming told it to kill, to destroy, to hunt down every human it could find. But something was wrong. This prey wasn't running. This tiny human was walking straight toward it with no fear at all. Young stopped just a few meters away from the towering creature. She tilted her head to one side, studying it the same way her father studied his research subjects. The Ravager's breathing was heavy and labored. She could see old scars mixed in with the fresh burn marks, evidence of years of pain and abuse. "You're hurt," she said softly in Korean, her young voice carrying clearly in the quiet lab. Then, remembering the basic galactic standard her father had taught her for talking to alien visitors, she repeated, "Bad people hurt you." The words seemed to hit the Ravager like a physical blow. Its massive head tilted to one side, those 6 glowing eyes blinking in sequence. For 3 centuries, this creature had known only commands shouted in anger. Only pain delivered through neural prods and surgical tools. No one had ever spoken to it with kindness.
How?
No one had ever acknowledged its suffering. The killing instinct that had been bred into its very DNA faltered for the first time in its existence. Confusion replaced bloodlust as it stared down at this impossible little human who showed no fear, only concerned. Behind their overturned table, the 3 scientists held their breath, unable to believe what they were seeing. The most dangerous weapon in the galaxy was hesitating, actually thinking. Instead of simply destroying everything in its path, Young stepped closer to the towering Ravager, her small eyes taking in every detail of the creature's battle-scarred body. What she saw made her heart ache the same way it had when she found injured animals. Back on New Sol, the creature's obsidian shell was covered in marks that told a horrible story. Circular burn scars dotted its arms and chest, the unmistakable pattern of neural shock prods used to force obedience. Long, precise surgical lines ran along its sides where scientists had cut it open again and again, studying its insides while it was still alive. Fresh plasma burns from the recent fight mixed with older wounds that had healed badly, creating a map of pain across its entire body. But it was the creature's eyes that really broke her heart.
Oh.
All 6 of them held the same look she had seen in caged animals at the research facility, a deep, endless sadness mixed with confusion about why the world was so cruel. "They hurt you so much," Young whispered, her voice barely audible over the ship's groaning hull. "I'm sorry they did that to you." The Ravager's massive head tilted further, and for a moment, something almost like recognition flickered in those glowing eyes. This tiny human wasn't just unafraid. She was actually sorry for its pain. In 3 centuries of existence, no one had ever apologized to it for anything. Behind their overturned table, the 3 alien scientists watched in terror as the little human girl moved even closer to the creature. Dr. Zefker, the lead researcher, tried to wave her away frantically with all 4 of his arms. But Young wasn't looking at them anymore. The Ravager suddenly straightened to its full height, looming over the child like a mountain of living darkness. Its right claw began to rise, razor-sharp talons catching the emergency lighting. Those talons had torn through starship hulls, ripped apart battle tanks, and ended the lives of thousands of soldiers. Any rational person would have run screaming. Any trained warrior would have reached for a weapon. But Young just stood there, looking up at the creature with the same patient expression she used when her father's research animals were being difficult. The massive claw hung in the air above her head, trembling slightly. The Ravager's genetic programming screamed at it to strike, to kill, to destroy this human as it had been created to do. But something about the child's calm presence was interfering with its neural pathways, creating confusion where there should have been only violent certainty. So-young watched the internal struggle playing out in the creature's 6 eyes. She had seen this before with frightened animals, the moment when they had to choose between their fear and their need for help. Sometimes her father's patience would lash out just before they learned to trust, testing whether the humans would hurt them back. "It's okay," she said softly, never taking her eyes off the Ravager's face. "I know you're scared, but I won't hurt you." The claw wavered for another heartbeat, then slowly began to lower. But So-young could see the creature was still fighting its programming, still torn between its engineered instincts and this new, impossible experience of kindness. That's when she remembered what her father always did with the most stubborn animals. In his lab, sometimes he said, you had to show them who was in charge, not through fear or pain, but through absolute confidence. Animals could sense when someone truly believed they would be obeyed, so Young took one more step forward, close enough now that she could feel the heat radiating from the Ravager's massive body. She planted her feet firmly on the debris. Flora straightened her small shoulders, pointed directly at the ground with all the authority her 7-year-old self could muster. "Sit," she commanded. The word rang out through the damaged biolab like a gunshot. It wasn't a request or a suggestion. It was an order, delivered with the kind of absolute certainty that only children possess. The same tone she used when her pet dog was misbehaving, the same voice that made even the largest animals in her father's lab pay attention. The Ravager froze completely. Its 6 eyes blinked in rapid sequence as its bioengineered brain tried to process what had just happened. For 300 years, it had responded only to pain, fear, and domination. Its handlers had controlled. It threw neural inhibitors and shock treatments. Its enemies had tried to stop it with overwhelming firepower, but this tiny human wasn't using any of those things. She was simply expecting to be obeyed, with the kind of natural authority that didn't need weapons or threats to back it up. The creature's programming, built on centuries of violence and intimidation, had no response to this. There was no protocol for dealing with fearless innocence, no genetic instruction for resisting pure, confident kindness. Slowly, incredibly, the massive Ravager began to lower itself toward the floor. Its movements were uncertain, almost confused, as if it couldn't quite believe what it was doing. But it continued to descend until it was sitting on its haunches like an enormous, deadly dog. The 3 alien scientists behind their tables stared in complete shock. Dr. Zefkares, her eyes were so wide, they looked like they might pop out of his blue-skinned head. His assistants had stopped breathing entirely. Throughout the ship, security officers watched their monitor screens in stunned silence. The feeds showed the impossible scene in crystal-clear detail. The most feared weapon in the galaxy. The creature that had terrorized star systems for centuries.
Ow.
Sitting obediently in front of a human child who barely came up to its knee. On the bridge, Captain Velter gripped his command chair so hard his claws left gouges in the metal. His hands shook as he reached for his communicator. His voice barely a whisper. "Command ... "You're not going to believe this," he managed to say. "The Ravager. It's the human child just. It's sitting. The monster is sitting." Response from Hegemony's command was immediate and frantic. "Repeat that, Captain. Did you say the Ravager is contained?" Velter looked at his monitors again, watching as So-young stood calmly in front of the sitting creature, neither of them moving. The most dangerous moment in his entire military career had just been resolved by a 7-year-old girl saying a single word. "Affirmative command," he said, still not quite believing it himself. "The Ravager is ... contained by a human child." She told it to sit, and it ... it actually did it. The silence on the other end of the communication lasted so long that Velter wondered if the transmission had been cut. When the response finally came, it was filled with the same disbelief he felt. "Captain, maintain visual contact with the situation. Do not interfere. We need to study this phenomenon. Humans can control our Ravagers." The transmission cut off, but Velter didn't need to hear the rest. If word of this got out, if other humans learned they could command these creatures, The entire balance of power in the galaxy would shift overnight. So-young looked at the massive creature sitting before her and felt the same gentle instinct she always had around hurt animals. The Ravager's 6 eyes watched her every movement. But there was no hostility in them anymore, just confusion and something that might have been hope. She reached into the small pocket of her jacket and pulled out a silver wrapper. It was her emergency nutrition bar, the one her father always made her carry just in case. The sweet, nutty smell filled the air as she unwrapped it, and she noticed the Ravager's nostrils flare slightly. "Hungry?" she asked, breaking the bar into smaller pieces. Her father had taught her that feeding was one of the best ways to build trust with frightened animals. "It's okay. It tastes good." She held out her small palm with a piece of the nutrition bar resting on it, just like she used to feed the gentle herbivores back at the research station. The Ravager stared at the offering, its advanced sensors analyzing every molecule. Its bioengineered brain, designed for warfare and destruction, had no experience with gifts freely given. For 3 centuries, anything placed near this creature had been either a weapon meant to harm it or a tool meant to control it. Neural probes, shock devices, surgical instruments, never once had anyone offered it something simply out of kindness. The creature's massive head lowered slowly, bringing those 6 glowing eyes level with So-young's face. She could feel its breath, warm and surprisingly clean, not the toxic fumes she might have expected from such a fearsome beast. Up close, she could see that its teeth, while sharp, were more like those of an omnivore than a pure predator. With movements so careful, they seemed impossible for something so large. The Ravager extended what looked like a smaller appendage from near its mouth, almost like a tongue, but more dexterous. It gently lifted the piece of nutrition bar from So-young's palm, careful not to even brush her skin with its natural weapons. The creature straightened up and seemed to analyze the taste for a moment. Then, for the first time since its creation, the Ravager's facial features shifted into what could only be described as surprise, followed by something like pleasure. The nutrition bar was sweet, with complex flavors its creators had never allowed it to experience. "You like it," So-young said with a smile, offering another piece. "My Appa says these have all the vitamins growing things need." Meanwhile, 3 levels down, Dr. Kim Tae-ho was frantically searching through the damaged corridors of the ship. The evacuation had been chaotic, but once he'd made it to a safe zone, he'd realized his daughter wasn't there. Against all orders, he'd convinced a security team to help him search for her. "Dr. Kim, we need to move carefully," warned Commander Jaxer, the leader of the search team. "That creature could be anywhere, and we don't know what state it's in." "My daughter is somewhere on this ship," Tae-ho replied firmly, not leaving. Without her, they followed the trail of destruction through the corridors, past damaged bulkheads and scattered equipment. The Ravager's path was easy to track. It had left claw marks in the metal walls and had torn through several blast doors. Like they were made of paper, the trail led them to the biolab section, where they could hear something impossible. The sound of a child's voice, speaking calmly and gently. Tae-ho's heart nearly stopped as he recognized his daughter's voice, coming from inside the damaged laboratory. So-young, he called out, but there was no answer. Just that continued soft talking, as if she were having a conversation with someone. The security team raised their weapons as they approached the lab entrance. Commander Jaxter held up a hand for silence, then carefully peered around the doorframe. What he saw made him freeze in complete shock. The Ravager was sitting calmly in the center of the destroyed lab, and a small human girl was kneeling next to one of its massive arms, gently examining what looked like an old wound. She was talking to it in the same soothing tone that caregivers used with patients in medical facilities. "The scar tissue formed incorrectly," So-young was saying, running her small finger along a particularly nasty burn mark. "It must hurt when you move this part, but scars can get better with proper care." Tae-ho pushed past the security team before anyone could stop him. "So-young, get away from that thing." His daughter looked up at him with the same calm expression she always wore when she was helping with his research. "It's okay, Appa. He's not mean. He's just scared and hurt like the animals in your lab." The Ravager's 6 eyes immediately focused. on this new human, and Teho could see the creature's muscles tense slightly. But instead of attacking, it seemed to be studying the interaction between father and daughter. Its advanced brain, designed for tactical analysis, was picking up on something it had never encountered before, the bond of family love. "So young, please come to me slowly," Teho said, trying to keep his voice steady. "That creature is very dangerous." "No, Appa. Look," she said, gently placing her hand on a scarred section of the Ravager's arm. "He's been hurt by bad people for a long time, but he doesn't want to hurt anyone. He's just lonely." As her small hand made contact with the creature's arm, something extraordinary happened. The Ravager's 6 eyes closed in sequence, and from deep within its chest came a sound that no one had ever heard from its species before. A low, rumbling vibration that was almost like purring. The sound reverberated through the biolab, causing loose equipment to vibrate slightly. But it wasn't threatening. It was the sound of contentment. Of a creature experiencing gentle touch for the first time in its long, painful existence. Commander Jaxter lowered his weapon slightly. "In all my years of military service," he whispered, "I've never seen anything like this. That sound, it's almost like it's happy." Dr. Tejo stared at his daughter and the massive creature she was comforting. His scientific mind was racing, trying to understand what he was witnessing. The Ravagers. Biomechanical design was supposed to make emotional bonding impossible. Yet here it was, responding to his daughter's kindness with what could only be described as affection. The creature's genetic programming. 3 centuries of conditioning for warfare and destruction was being rewritten by the simple touch of a child who saw past its fearsome exterior to the pain beneath. Neural pathways that had only known commands and punishment were forming new connections, creating the capacity for something the hegemony had never intended their weapon to possess: the ability to feel cared for. As Sa Young continued to gently examine the creature's scars, that soft purring sound continued, filling the damaged lab with a warmth that seemed impossible in such a place of destruction. The most feared weapon in the galaxy had discovered something more powerful than all its bioengineered might: the healing power of innocent compassion. Within hours of the incident aboard the Crimson Fang, encrypted messages were racing across hyperspace communication networks. The security footage was too incredible to believe, yet there it was, clear video. Evidence of a human child commanding the galaxy's most feared weapon with a single word. The footage reached Hegemony High Command first, causing an emergency session that lasted 18 straight hours. General Vexmorth, architect of the Ravager program, watched the recording for the 15th time, his scaled hands trembling with rage and disbelief. "This is impossible," he hissed at his advisors. 3 centuries of genetic programming cannot be undone by one small human. But the evidence was undeniable. Not only had the Ravager obeyed the child, but it had shown signs of genuine emotion, something that was supposed to be genetically impossible. The implications were terrifying for an empire built on the fear these creatures inspired. Within days, the story had spread to every corner of known space. News networks across 1,000 worlds ran the footage continuously. The headline was always the same: "Human child tames unstoppable killing machine." The Galactic Council convened an emergency session on the neutral station of Harmony Point. Representatives from hundreds of species gathered to watch the recording and debate its meaning. Some called it a hoax, others a miracle, but none could deny what they were seeing. Ambassador Thelsara of the peaceful Calorian Republic spoke first. "If humans possess this ability naturally, we must reconsider everything we know about interspecies relations." The hegemony's representative, Minister Korthval, slammed his fist on the podium. "That weapon belongs to the hegemony. We demand its immediate return, along with the human responsible for this this theft." The council president, Uradine, a wise elder from the ancient Vorth collective, raised her hand for silence. The creature was not stolen. It chose. For the first time in its existence, it made a choice based on something other than programming. This changes everything. The debate raged for days, but the decision was unanimous when the vote came. The Ravager would not be returned to the hegemony. Instead, Dr. Kim Tae-ho and his daughter would be granted asylum on Haven Prime, a peaceful research world under council protection. so Dash Young had already chosen a name for her new friend during the ASEs. Journey to Haven Prime. Konjay, she announced one morning, patting the massive creature's arm as it sat beside her in the ship's cargo hold. Like my grandfather's old dog back on Earth, he was big and scary-looking too, but really gentle inside. Doc. The Ravager now. Kongji tilted his massive head at the sound of his new name. His 6 eyes blinked in that slow, thoughtful way that had become familiar to everyone on the ship. For the first time in centuries, he had an identity beyond weapon or monster. Teho watched his daughter interact with the creature and marveled at what he was witnessing. As a xenobiologist, he understood the scientific implications, but as a father, he simply saw his child's natural gift for healing the wounded, no matter how large or fearsome they might appear. You realize, he told Commander Jax there one evening, that she's rewriting 300 years of genetic conditioning just by being kind to him. The commander nodded, watching through the observation window as Saw Young taught Koei a simple game with colored blocks. The massive creature was learning to be gentle, to play, to experience joy for the first time in his existence. My daughter's always been special with animals, Teho continued. But this... This is beyond anything I imagined possible. Haven Prime was a world of endless gardens and research facilities where scientists from across the galaxy came to study life in all its forms. When the transport ship landed, crowds of researchers gathered to witness the impossible partnership between human child and reformed weapon. Dr. Yuki Sato, the station's director, personally welcomed them. Dr. Kim, your daughter has given us all a gift beyond measure. We've prepared a facility where you can continue your research and where KOI can learn to live in peace. The research center became Sol Young's new playground and Kalnai's new school. Every day, she taught him something new about gentle living. How to water plants without crushing them, how to watch baby animals without frightening them, how to use his massive strength to build rather than destroy. The most remarkable change came gradually. Kong's aggressive programming, designed to be permanent and unbreakable, began to fade under constant exposure to kindness. His posture changed from predatory crouch to relaxed standing. His movements became careful rather than menacing. Most importantly, his 6 eyes learned to express emotions beyond rage and hunger. Word of their success spread, and soon other incidents began occurring across the galaxy. A 12-year-old boy on Titan Colony befriended an escaped Ravager by sharing his lunch. Twin sisters on the farming world of New Series taught a damaged creature how to help harvest crops instead of destroying them. Each incident followed the same pattern. Human children, their natural fearlessness and capacity for compassion, reaching out to creatures that adults saw only as monsters. And every time, Ravagers responded by choosing connection over destruction. The hegemony's military superiority crumbled as their ultimate. Weapons became symbols of redemption instead of terror. Planets that had surrendered at the mere mention of Ravagers now sent delegations to Haven Prime, hoping to learn the secret of humanity's gift. Years passed, and Saw Young grew from a small child into a confident teenager. If anything, it grew stronger as they both matured and learned together. On her 16th birthday, she stood in the sunset gardens of Haven Prime, watching Kongay carefully tend to a row of flowering vines. His massive claws, once instruments of war, now gently supported delicate stems and positioned growing lights with precision that would make any gardener proud. "Look, Appa," she called to her father, who was documenting their latest breakthrough in interspecies communication. "I learned how to braid the vine tendrils to make them stronger." Dr. Teho looked up from his notes and smiled. His daughter had become living proof that the universe's greatest power wasn't found in weapons or warfare, but in the simple courage to show kindness to those who had never experienced it. As the twin sons of Haven Prime set behind the mountains, Saw Young walked through the gardens with her oldest friend. Kongai carried a basket woven from native grasses, filled with flowers they had grown together. Each bloom represented a small victory over the darkness of his past. The galaxy had learned the most important lesson in its history. that even the most carefully designed hatred could be transformed by love, and that sometimes the smallest voice carries enough power to change everything. The former weapon of war had become a gardener. The frightened child had become a bridge between worlds. And in their friendship, countless species found hope for a future where understanding could triumph over fear. The end.